Leave the woman and get lost." Ryan burst into laughter, but after a moment, his face turned serious, and he shouted loudly. Just then, a child's voice called out, "What are you doing here?" "Master Charles, what are you doing in a place like this?" Ryan exclaimed in surprise. Ignoring Ryan's startled reaction, Charles continued speaking. "Hey, Ryan, you don't even know who this guy is, do you? That's not something the Irving gang would be proud of." "Huh? What do you mean?" "He's just some guy running a small restaurant, isn't he?" Charles sighed dramatically and then, turning to me, politely bowed his head and said, "I'm sorry, sir. Could you introduce yourself to these guys?" Confused but compliant, I decided to do as I was told and introduced myself. "My name is Isaac Turner." "Is that good enough?" The moment I said my name, Ryan's expression visibly changed to one of shock. "Isaac Turner? Impossible. No way." After discovering who I really was, Ryan was about to face a living nightmare. "My name is Isaac Turner, and I'm 56 years old. I run a small traditional restaurant with my wife in the town where I was born and raised. Other than the fact that I've never worked for a company, I'm just an ordinary middle-aged man like any other. When I started working after finishing school, I thought men in their 50s were ancient, but now that I've reached that age, I realize I'm not much different from when I was younger. Of course, I'm sure my body is getting weaker each year, but so far, I haven't noticed any significant decline in my strength or memory. In fact, I think I find life easier now than I did in my youth, thanks to the experience I've gained over the years. I totally get why older folks around the world don't want to be treated like they're past their prime. Many lively men like that stop by my restaurant, Daisy Place, on a whim, sharing their complaints about work or problems at home. And it's usually my wife, Katrina, who listens patiently to their endless chatter. Katrina is over 10 years younger than me, still in her mid-40s. With her refined features, she looks great in the traditional attire of a hostess. Even from my perspective as her husband, Katrina is quite a beauty and has become a bit of an idol among the older men who come to our place. They all adore her, calling out, "Katrina, Katrina," and there are even some customers who come just to see her. I'm always grateful for Katrina, who is not only friendly but also very good at dealing with customers. I have a beautiful wife by my side, my body and mind are healthy, and I get to do the work I love. Is there anything in this world more fortunate than this? As long as this life continues, I don't wish for anything more. Or at least, that's what I thought. Our restaurant, Daisy Place, typically operates from the evening. It's a cozy place with just a counter seating and one private room. We specialize in local alcohol and regional dishes, and most of our customers are office workers stopping by on their way home from work. We deliberately designed the exterior to look uninviting to keep the crowds away, so we rarely get young people or tourists. By the way, the name Daisy Place comes from Daisy, which is Katrina's birth flower. I originally wanted to take Katrina's name, but she felt too embarrassed, so we decided against it. Now, our small restaurant, Daisy Place, has another side to it. On weekends, during the daytime, we run a kids' cafeteria that provides meals for children. These days, kids' cafeterias are often in the news due to issues with local government relations and funding, but thankfully, ours has been running smoothly so far. That's thanks to the support from our local shopping district and neighbors. However, one afternoon, an unexpected incident occurred at our restaurant. It happened while we were serving lunch to some children who had come by. That day, perhaps due to the rain, there were fewer kids than usual, just my wife and me, along with two siblings who come every week. Feeling generous, I decided to treat them, saying, "Today's a special day, and served them ice cream for dessert. The brothers were delighted. Katrina and I smiled as we watched them enjoy themselves. But that cheerful atmosphere quickly disappeared. This is so annoying. I'm totally soaked. This is the worst. A young man, who seemed to be in his 30s, came in, grumbling loudly. He was wearing an expensive-looking suit, but he didn't seem like an office worker at all. With his flashy hair color and casual speech, I initially thought he was a youthfully dressed man. The man carelessly took off his jacket, still dripping with water, and shook it violently, scattering droplets everywhere. The four of us in the shop watched, holding our breath, as this strange man made his entrance. But the youthfully dressed man didn't care about the tense atmosphere at all. He simply sat down at the counter seating and, looking at Katrina, bluntly said, "Beer." It seemed he was just looking to have a quick drink while waiting out the rain. However, I felt sorry for the man, but Daisy Place wasn't a regular restaurant at that moment, and it was operating as a kids' cafeteria. Besides, we needed to start preparing for the evening's business soon. In response to the rude man's demand, Katrina lowered her eyebrows apologetically and replied, "I'm sorry, sir. We only start serving in the evening. We're in the middle of preparations now, so we can't serve alcohol. I apologize for the inconvenience." I don't care if you're preparing. When I say I want a drink, you should just pour it. Besides, it's raining outside. You expect me to run home in this rain? Don't mess with me. The man shouted at Katrina, his voice loud and threatening. He even leaned over the counter, glaring straight into Katrina's face. I could see her slender body tense up with fear under his aggressive behavior. I couldn't allow him to intimidate Katrina like that. I quickly stepped between Katrina and the man. "If you'd like, we can give you one of our umbrellas. No need to return it, so please feel free to take it with you." Hearing my words, Katrina swiftly turned around and headed to the back to fetch an umbrella. I faced the man, deliberately smiling as I did so. The man hesitated for a moment but quickly regained his composure and shouted again, "Are you telling me to leave? You're welcome to interpret it that way." I replied with a friendly smile. I must have been pretty angry that he had shouted at Katrina. Without realizing it, I had provoked him even further, and his anger escalated. "You old man! Don't you dare disrespect me! Do you even know who I am? I'm Ryan from the Irving gang. Don't think you can mess with a mafia and get away with it. I'll destroy this place." As he shouted, he stood up forcefully, knocking over his chair with a loud crash that echoed through the shop. At that moment, the younger of the two brothers who had been quietly eating ice cream in the back room started crying. Until then, he had been holding his breath, but the loud noise and the man's shouting had finally overwhelmed him. Ryan, now identified as a mafia instead of a youthfully dressed man, seemed irritated by the child's crying. He clicked his tongue and sneered, "Kids in here, too," as he peered into the back room. I quickly stepped in front of the boys to shield them from the man. Just as Ryan reached out to grab my collar, the shop door opened, and a young man's voice called out, "Boss, it's time." Apparently, Ryan had left his underlings outside the shop. "If we don't leave soon, we'll be late for the meeting with the big boss." Hearing this, Ryan spat out, "You better remember this," and reluctantly turned his back on me and left the shop. For the moment, it seemed the crisis had passed. That day, we decided to close the shop early and took the brothers home just to be safe. And the next day, we went on a trip we had planned for a while. Actually, every year, my wife and I go on a trip together around the time of our wedding anniversary. With our kind of business, it's hard to take a long trip, but we always make sure to manage this one getaway. Our regulars know about it, so they often say things like, "Where are you going this year? Enjoy your time together." I was still worried about Ryan, who had come to the shop during the day, but we decided to go on our trip as planned. After all, it was a rare opportunity for us to enjoy some time together. Little did we know what was about to happen. The trip with Katrina was, to put it mildly, perfect. The hot springs, the inn's meals, and the service exceeded our expectations, and Katrina seemed genuinely pleased. The dishes made with local ingredients were especially delicious, and I felt like I learned something new as a cook. But that happy feeling was shattered the moment we returned home. After unpacking at home, we headed to the shop together, only to find ourselves surrounded by 4 men. And, of course, among them was Ryan. "There you are, old man. You made me wait 3 days. You must be Ryan, if I'm not mistaken? Not bad for an old man." "That's right, I'm Ryan from the Irving," he replied with a smug grin, his mood completely changed from the last time. Honestly, I didn't want to get involved with him, but since he knew where our shop was, I couldn't just dismiss him. I decided to respond as politely as possible, trying not to provoke him. "So, what brings Ryan from the Irving gang to our place?" "You see, when a mafia shows up with his men, it's obvious, isn't it? I'm here to collect. Today, I'm here for the protection money. I'll settle for $10,000 this time, including the trouble you caused me last time. How about it? It's a bargain, right? Protection money is an illegal fee mafia demand from businesses in exchange for supposed protection. Of course, there is no legal obligation for the business to pay it. Such demands for protection money or territory fees are not just something from gangster movies, they still happen in the real world. We've been running our shop here for many years, but I've never heard of the Irving gang asking for protection money. It's probably something Ryan decided to do on his own." I sighed inwardly but continued speaking without changing my demeanor. "I'm sorry you came all this way, but we must decline. We don't need any protection, and we've been doing business here for a long time. We have no reason to pay such a fee." "Ha? Are you trying to make an enemy of our gang? You've got some nerve." As expected, Ryan's temper flared instantly. But I wasn't about to back down, so I replied calmly, "No, that's not my intention. But our shop has never once been asked for such a fee by the Irving gang. Are you sure this is something your gang is officially requesting?" "Of course it is. Keep pushing your luck, and you'll regret it." With that, Ryan suddenly threw a punch at my face. I quickly dodged, letting his fist glance off my left cheek instead of my nose, then pretended to stagger dramatically. I wasn't hurt because I've always been pretty tough, but Katrina, looking worried, rushed to my side to support me. Maybe I had overdone it a bit with the performance. At that moment, Ryan noticed Katrina standing beside me and gave a sly smile. "Actually, I've changed my mind. I'll cut it down to $5,000 out of pity. But in return, I'm taking that woman with me." "What? There's no way I would agree to that. She is my wife." Shocked, I reverted to my usual way of speaking. Ryan, ignoring my reaction, continued insensitively, "Come on. The woman would prefer us over some old man like you, right? She's a bit older, but she's a beauty. I'll keep her until I get bored. Don't you dare. If you lay a hand on Katrina, I'll send every one of you straight to hell." "Ha! Listen to this old man. What do you think you're gonna do to us? Ryan laughed loudly for a moment, then his expression turned serious, and he growled, "Leave the woman and get lost." It seemed unlikely this situation could be resolved peacefully, I thought, when suddenly, from behind, a child's voice said, "What are you doing here?" The unexpected, innocent voice made everyone turn around at once. There stood a boy who looked to be in the upper grades of elementary school. I'm pretty good at remembering faces, but I didn't recognize this kid from the kids' cafeteria or the neighborhood. Katrina also tilted her head in confusion, wondering where he could be from. I thought I needed to get the child out of there quickly, but before I could say anything, the mafia reacted first. "Master Charles, why are you here?" Katrina and I exchanged glances, puzzled by the term master. Now that they mentioned it, the boy was dressed quite well. If the mafia was calling him master, then. As I was piecing it together, the boy spoke to Ryan. "I told you not to call me that outside the house." "Ryan, you never learn." "Sorry, master." "Charles. So, are you going to answer my question?" I asked what you're doing here. It was now clear that this boy, Charles, was somehow connected to the mafia. Judging by how deferential Ryan was being, the kid must be related to someone important. Ryan answered Charles's question with a cheerful tone. "What am I doing?" "Just working, of course." This guy here was resisting, so I was teaching him a lesson. "Come on, master, it's dangerous here. So let's go back. I'll have one of my men escort you." Ryan signaled to one of his subordinates to take Charles away, but Charles shook off the man's arm and continued speaking. "Hey, Ryan. Did you really mess with this guy without knowing who he is? That's disgraceful, even for the Irving gang." "Huh? What do you mean? He's just some old man running a small restaurant, right?" Charles let out an exaggerated sigh and then, bowing politely, said to me, "I'm sorry, sir." "Could you introduce yourself to these guys?" Not understanding what was going on, I did as I was told and introduced myself. "My name is Isaac Turner." "Is that good enough?" After my awkward introduction, I looked at Charles, confused, and he responded cheerfully, "Yes." "Thank you very much." In contrast, the mafia's reaction was the complete opposite of Charles's. The moment I said my name, they visibly showed signs of distress. "Isaac Turner. That's impossible." "No way." As soon as Ryan heard my name, he tried to run away, but Charles stopped him. The other mafia members were also pale-faced, trembling with fear. Seeing the mafia so terrified just because I introduced myself was an odd sight, and Katrina looked up at me, eyes wide with surprise, and asked, "Honey, who are you?" "Well, that's..." I felt it was finally time to reveal my past to Katrina, but before I could speak, Charles answered her question in my place. "Sorry to surprise you, ma'am. Of course, Isaac here has nothing to do with the mafia. He's just a regular person. But he's so strong that he's become a legend in our gang." "A legend? My husband?" "I did hear he was in the self-defense forces when he was younger, but is he really that strong?" Just as Katrina said, I was in the self-defense forces until I was in my 30s. I started the small restaurant after leaving the forces and marrying Katrina. But just being a former soldier wouldn't make mafia so cautious. I was actually in a special forces unit. With no close family, having lost my parents at a young age, I was recruited by a certain special unit and remained there until I retired. I could easily neutralize four mafia barehanded in an instant. However, I had never told Katrina about the special forces. That information was classified, even from family. I had always been careful to keep this secret, but the mafia has its ways of gathering information. It seemed the Irving gang had somehow discovered I was former special forces. Just as I prepared myself for the consequences, Charles said something unexpected. "Well, of course, ma'am. There aren't many people who can take down a bear with their bare hands." "A bear with his bare hands? Oh, you didn't know?" Oops, should I not have said that? Charles covered his mouth quickly, looking up at me with a worried expression. For someone who speaks so maturely, he could still show a childlike expression at times. I patted Charles gently on the head and said with a wry smile, "No, it's fine. It's my fault for keeping it a secret. I didn't want to worry Katrina. But it seems the Irving gang found out anyway." Charles looked relieved and said, "Oh, that's good," before continuing with his explanation. "It wasn't really the our gang, but rather my grandfather, the boss. He got the information on his own. Since then, his favorite phrase has been, 'Don't mess with Isaac Turner.' The younger members even call you Isaac the Bear Slayer and are terrified of him. Many of our members come from areas plagued by wild animals, so they understand the terror of bears. Someone who could take down a bear with his bare hands is naturally someone they respect." "I see." Charles, the grandson of the boss, was exaggerating, but there was some truth to his story. A few years ago, while hunting in the mountains with a hunter friend, I had a run-in with a bear and ended up fighting it. In the end, the bear was shot dead with a hunting rifle, so I didn't actually kill it with my bare hands, but the story spread that way. Not wanting to draw attention, I'd asked the hunter to keep quiet, but somehow the information leaked. And a local reporter even requested an interview. Of course, I declined. But it seems that reporter's story got to the Irving gang. I was relieved to know that it wasn't my special forces background that had been exposed. Once Charles finished explaining, he turned back to the now visibly frightened Ryan and his men. "Ryan, you lied to me. There's no way the boss would order an attack on Isaac's shop. And I saw you punch Isaac, who didn't even resist. Please, master, just don't tell the boss. I swear I didn't know. I never imagined Isaac Turner would be in a place like this." Ryan dropped to his knees and bowed his head to the ground. The other mafia members had also quietly sat down on the ground, kneeling. It seemed the real issue wasn't so much my presence, but rather that they had gone against the boss's orders. Apparently, they were very afraid of the boss. However, Charles continued speaking mercilessly. "It's not just about today, is it? I also know what you did 3 days ago, Ryan. You barged into the shop outside of business hours and threatened the lady and the kids who were there, didn't you? How do you know about that?" Ryan, too shocked to come up with an excuse, blurted out. "Indeed, how does Charles know about it?" As I was wondering, Charles quickly provided an answer. "You see the kid in the shop that day. He's a friend from my class. One of the few who doesn't avoid me even though they know I'm the son of a mafia. What, that kid is Master's friend. He has to look after his little brother, so he can't hang out much, but he told me everything. He said he was too scared to come back to the shop because of some guy named Ryan from the Irving gang. Apparently, the older of the two brothers who came to the kids' cafeteria was a friend of Charles's." Ryan looked utterly despondent, lost for words. He seemed to have no strength left to even make excuses. Charles glanced down at the stunned Ryan with a look of contempt and calmly issued an order to someone. "Get them out of here. They're disturbing the shop." Out of nowhere, several men in black suits appeared and began dragging away the four underlings one by one. Ryan snapped out of his stupor and tried to resist, but they hauled him away without a word. One of the men in black pulled out a package from his pocket and offered it to me, saying it was for medical expenses. But there was no way I would accept anything from the mafia. Besides, I had deliberately taken the hit to avoid provoking Ryan further, even though I could have dodged it. I didn't need compensation for an injury I chose to sustain myself. I declined the offer from the man in black and called out to Charles, who was getting into a car. "Hey, could you tell those brothers that there's no need to be scared anymore? They're welcome to come back to the shop anytime." "Got it. I'll let them know at school. And if you'd like, you're welcome to come too, Charles. You're always invited." Charles's eyes widened in surprise, and he hesitated, looking troubled. But, seeing Charles's troubled expression, Katrina gently spoke to him. "Don't worry about it. The kids' cafeteria is open to any child. I'm sure those brothers would be happy if you come too." Charles's expression softened a bit at Katrina's words, but he didn't say he would come. Instead, he quietly bowed to us and walked away. He was likely concerned about his connection to the mafia. Sometime later, a certain person visited Daisy Place in a disguise. It was Charles's grandfather, Henry, the boss of the Irving gang. In fact, Henry had occasionally visited our shop alone, even before the recent incident. Of course, Henry never openly identified himself as a mafia, and I never brought up his line of work. Incidentally, my wife Katrina had no idea about Henry's true identity and casually called him Harry. Charles had said I was unrelated to the Irving gang, but in reality, it wasn't entirely true. Henry and I first met when we were in elementary school. I had no family and was raised by distant relatives, but the home environment was far from ideal, and I was always hungry. A couple who ran a local diner felt sorry for me and would sometimes give me free meals. There were a few other kids who came for free food, and one of them was Henry. To clarify, Henry and I were never really friends. Whenever our eyes met, we would start brawling, and even when we ended up at the diner together, we wouldn't exchange a word. But back then, Henry was the only one I couldn't beat in a fight, so I respected his strength. Apparently, Henry also acknowledged my skills. I left the town to pursue further studies, while Henry stayed and became a mafia. For many years, we neither saw nor thought of each other, but it seems Henry had kept me in mind. He started coming to my shop after the whole bear incident. He usually just chatted with Katrina and never spoke directly to me, but after the recent incident, he came by and muttered a quiet apology. "I'm sorry." Then, he bought the most expensive alcohol and offered it to all the customers in the shop. In return, I silently served him a dish I knew he liked. And just like that, the matter was settled between us. There was no need for conversation. Even though the incident was resolved, it had caused quite a stir in front of the shop, and rumors spread throughout the neighborhood. There were plenty of exaggerated stories, but after filtering through the information, it became clear that Ryan had been punished within the gang. The specifics are unclear to regular folks, but according to those who spotted Ryan in another town, he was seen walking with a noticeable limp. It's almost certain that this was a result of some form of punishment. Whether it's a temporary injury or a lifelong one, it's clear that Ryan lost his standing within the Irving gang. Naturally, he never showed up at our shop again, and there have been no sightings of him in the neighborhood either. Katrina and I continue to live our peaceful life, just as we did before the incident. The only change is that Charles has started coming to the kids' cafeteria. At first, he seemed to feel awkward about using the kids' cafeteria despite not needing it and being associated with his family's business. But after some encouragement from his grandfather, he began coming gladly. However, at Charles's suggestion, we decided to accept a small amount of money from the children. Of course, we don't ask for an amount the kids can't afford, and in fact, we don't set a specific amount at all. Some kids drop in $1, 50 cents, or even 10 cents in the box and leave. If they can't afford it, they don't have to pay, and they can pay what they want whenever they are able. The box is placed where it can't be seen from outside, so no one knows how much each child contributes or if they contribute at all. This was done out of consideration for children from families like the brothers who truly need the kids' cafeteria. Incidentally, we have had some trouble with Charles trying to slip large bills into the box when we aren't looking. Recently, we added a new rule with a maximum limit of $5 to prevent this. It's often heard that children of the mafia face bullying at school, and Charles was no exception. Despite having done nothing wrong himself, he was avoided and talked about behind his back. However, thanks to the kids' cafeteria, he's made more friends besides those brothers, and Charles has started to show a more childlike side. Katrina always smiles warmly as she watches the lively children. Seeing her like that fills me with happiness every day.